awesome. Oh my gosh. Yesterday, Cheryl did a wonderful workshop, music therapy for those with dementia and Alzheimer's and their caregivers. If that's something that you would like to talk to her about, please do. She is amazing, just amazing how she uses music to kind of light them up again, kind of bring them back through music and their past and their history. It was just fascinating. Okay, the topic today is kindness towards ourselves. Isn't that nice? Don't you feel good? Let's be kind to ourselves. You know, when I was telling people, people would say, well, what's your topic? And I said, it's kindness towards ourselves. And they, oh, that feels so good. You're going to make us feel so good. Like wrapping you up in a little fuzzy blanket. Anyway, it is that way because that's the first place love starts. We can't give what we don't have. And to me, being kind to myself might be having a nice massage or going out to a real special dinner, eating an ice cream sundae. Don't get to do that too often anymore. But you know, that's about a talk in and of itself, and that talk is done. Because I want to go in a not different direction, but a deeper direction. I want to talk about your mind, drugs, and rock and roll. And it has a lot to do with being kind to ourselves. So hang in there. Because the book that we study so much is The Science of Our Mind. The Science of Mind, Ernest Holmes, after reading the greatest world's texts, synthesizing it down to who we are as individual spiritual beings. You know, the Dalai Lama says if we have an undisciplined mind, it's like being a rogue elephant. It's going all different directions, all different places, creating havoc if we have an undisciplined mind. But he said, really, it's worse when we have negative emotions in our mind. It's like a rogue elephant, and it can cause great pain to not only ourselves, but to our family and our friends. And so these negative thoughts and emotions are real, and they do impact other people. When our real aspiration in life is to be happy, to really just be happy. You know, for centuries, people have tried to find the great elixir, not just for youth, but for happiness. And they will go lots of different places. If I could only go here, if I could only do this, I'll be happy. If I could only be friends with this person, I'd be happy. If I had this special dress, I'd be happy. And, you know, we never seem to get there. But there's this inner drive that says there's something in the world that will help me be happy. Sometimes we create ceremonies, or we go on retreats, or we do special things. It's like trying to wave a magic wand to capture it, to capture love, to capture happiness. But on the spiritual path, what we do is through our conscious development, or development of our mind, is through meditation, spiritual practices, we're reaching higher levels of consciousness and connection with the divine energy, and we find in our own self greater happiness, greater peace, greater serenity. It's really sweet when you think about it. You mean all I have to do is do it myself? That's why we're here, to support you on that path. Because we know within you is deeper love, deeper devotion, deeper selflessness, deeper love for the world and for people and for spirit, God, whatever you call that entity, God. But some people think the goal of meditation is to find ecstasy, to be in that blissful state. But, you know, I have to come down out of that state too. And so ecstasy may be wanting to shut our mind off from reality, but in a spiritual path, we want to be fully present in reality, fully present. Because the more we gain mental clarity and our connection with the One, our connection with our soul, our connection with the essence of spirit in and through all of us, we have more peak experiences. And those are really juicy. What we're trying to do through our consciousness, through building our level of awareness and consciousness in our mind, is we're trying to bridge our mind that's right here, right now, with other levels that exist. You know, string theory says if string theory is right about the depth of nature, the depth of the world, it has to have 12 different dimensions in order to work. Jesus said, my Father's house has many mansions. There are many, many dimensions. And so it's through meditation and developing our mind and consciousness that we can tap into that. It's a slow transformation. I don't know if you remember, but when I took algebra in high school and I got the book and the answers were in the back of the book, I thought, hallelujah, I'm blessed. You know, I hand it to you, you're not there. How long did it take us to use and build our mental abilities to be able to do an algebra equation? It took me a whole term, and I never took Algebra 102 because it was just too hard. But that's what it is. We're building. I can hand you all the spiritual books I can. I always did that to my brother. He said, you know, I never read any of those. But he appreciated it. So just getting the book doesn't get us there. It takes study. It takes practice. It takes doing your spiritual practices, as we say here. And that's why classes are valuable, because it gets into the meat of it. It gets into the meat of this teaching and what it really means to build our consciousness, what it really means to expand our mind. This next month, I'm going to be doing the original Science of Mind 101. If you remember that, it is the basics. It's the basics. It's the first 6 chapters of the Science of Mind text, and it is delicious. It is so wonderful because Ernest Holmes was so passionate about this. But I've got some competition. Reverend Sue, she's going to be doing a spiritual development class called Eastern Mind, Western Bodies, and I would love to take that. Chris Johnson's offering Myth and Spirit, which is studying Joseph Campbell's work. If you've seen him on TV in the past, he was a brilliant man. Diana Johnson's doing New Foundations, which also touches into the history of New Thought, of which this teaching is a New Thought teaching. Marilyn's offering The Path of Power and Leadership, the nature of our personal power. If you don't feel powerful in your life, that would be a good one. That would be a good class. And Reverend Pam offers, it's very popular. She keeps offering it because people keep craving more of the presence process. It uncovers the most intimate relationship in your life with yourself. With yourself. So these are fantastic opportunities for you to build the mind, build the consciousness, tap into the reality that God is all there is, that there's an infinite intelligence in all of this. One of my favorite books is by Raymond Charles Barker. It's called The Power of Decision. And that's powerful when we do make decisions. And he says, unhappy people do not see themselves correctly. Their disturbed emotions distort their reasoning capacity. They want to change everything. Don't we want to change the world? But we don't want to change ourselves, you know. The truth is, a changed experience can only happen to a person who is changed individually. He says problems are a sign that there's something in mind that has to be done. Because that's our power center, our mind. It's an inside job. We are in charge of our mind. Hopefully we don't give that to anyone else, which is why I wanted to talk about drugs, because that is sometimes where people want to let their mind go. Give me a drug, take me out of the picture, I don't want to be in charge, and we give drugs the power to be in charge of us. Now, I'm not a drug person. I'm barely an aspirin person. But in the science, in this book, which is what the quote was from, The Science of Becoming Oneself, it's a fascinating book. The guy's brilliant. I probably underlined half of every page until I got to this chapter that says, "Do drugs expand our consciousness?" And I skipped over it. I thought he was going to say yes. Finally, at the end of the book, I thought, I better read that chapter. And he said no. And you know, I remember I had several friends in the past many years who said their creativity, their music, their ability to sing was really only coming through when they were smoking marijuana or whatever, that was really when they were creative. But then years later, they said, you know, I used to believe that. I can't believe I believe that. I can't believe I believe that. Because without that, my creativity level is just amazing. And what he says in the book here is that when we're on drugs, we don't know where the inspiration comes from because our mind is not yet adapted to that plane of information. Our mind is not ready to function on that plane of information. So we may see colors, we may see whatever. I never forget the story from Ram Dass, if you know who he is, wonderful spiritual man. But when he first started taking psychedelics when he was at Harvard with Wavy Gravy and Timothy O'Leary, they were on these psychedelics and he was crawling on the floor and he crawled to a table where there's a pen and a paper and he wrote down, "It's all God." And then the next day he said, "Why did I have to go through that just to realize it's all God?" It changed his life. It really did. In this book, Torkim says he had two friends that were in college and they were taking mathematics and physics, big subjects. Their goal was to create some kind of a smog device that could help the health of people who live in really smoggy areas. I mean, what a great idea. So they started taking marijuana, then it went to LSD, then it went to heroin, and they left the university and moved into a commune and got venereal disease. And how devastating. He said the drugs expanded their consciousness, but when that happened, it took away all ability to take care of themselves. They were unable to take care of themselves. How sad is that? And we see that happening around the country in many ways. And Paul and I were talking about that and thought there's got to be more research done to let people know the impact of these things. You have some initial happiness, but wow, the results down the road can be devastating. But you know, some people are trying to escape from a relationship, a marriage, a job, a boredom, who knows what. And escapism is interesting because nothing gets solved. You're just in a state where you don't care. So drugs do not develop our consciousness. They affect our brain. They crack open the ability to tap into these astral planes, but we don't have the ability to understand it. So the question is, well, why do that? When with meditation, you can really get a good high. You can really tap in to the energy of the oneness of spirit and God in the world. I'm going to skip some of this because I sound redundant, and I want to get to the juicier part, that our goal should be independence from things that create fear or doubt. We should be independent from fear or doubt, but when we get onto drugs, when people do, they're trying to escape a life they have fear and doubt about. Do you see the difference? It's to be independent of that, not to create it and recreate it and re-experience it. So if you've ever had concerns about our country and the direction we're going, or the world, and you're not looking at it, I have many people that say, oh no, I don't read the paper, I don't look at the news. It's avoidance. How can we help something that we don't want to even look at? I asked you to think about that because it's escapism, it's ignoring what's happening. How can you bring greater love, peace, happiness, joy into the world if you're ignoring what's happening and what's causing it? That's why we have so many opportunities to go outside this community into the greater community and Much of our focus is on the homeless, those with HIV, the very, very poor. It's up to us to bring greater love and truth and goodness into the world, and we can't do that by avoiding the world. So I hope you hear that. Because it's time to talk about rock and roll. This week we watched a TV show about the Beatles, Sgt. Pepper's Lonely Hearts Club Band anniversary album. Oh my God, it was a great, great show. And all the stories about how they got the album going and how they created these songs and all this, it was just delightful. But the reason I wanted to bring it here this morning is that in so much of the rock and roll culture, there were drugs. And many experimented with drugs, and many, many died from drugs. Some of the greatest musicians ever. So I was glad to see that the Beatles came through that, because I remember seeing pictures of them meditating. It's like, they got it. They really did get it. The peak experience you can get from the practice of meditation. Because to be a rock and roll star requires tremendous effort. I can't even imagine how much effort. Tremendous, tremendous effort, focus, work, work, work. And when it starts to fall apart, we can be very unkind to ourselves. When you've had a big project and you're working really hard and it seems like it's falling apart, you just want to kick yourself. You want to go hide. You want to avoid the consequences. But the Beatles, to me, are a great example of how they reclaimed their sense of destiny when they were just about ready to give it all up. You know what they did? They took time to be kind to themselves. It was in early 1966 when they were tired of doing live performances. John Lennon's opinion said, in his opinion, he said, you know, at this point we could stand up 4 wax bodies of us and the crowds would just go crazy. We don't have to play our music. He felt their music had nothing to do with anything anymore because there were just these crowds of screaming people. Couldn't hear the music really. You knew it was good. The albums were good, but in a live performance, he said it was basically a bloody tribal rite of passage. All these people would come and scream and yell, and they'd play their music, and they were not fulfilled at all. And can you imagine how that felt to feel like your music is worthless after all you've done? You know, lesser people would have given up long ago. But they continued. And in June of that year, they were scheduled to go to Germany and then Japan. And in Germany, they received an anonymous telegram that said, "Do not go to Tokyo, your life is in danger." And they took this real serious because there were thousands of people in Japan that did not want them to come because they were going to sing in what they called a sacred arena, a sacred place. They didn't want the Beatles to come. And so the police came out in the thousands to protect them. And they moved them around in armored vehicles all through town to their place where they were going to sing and back to the hotel. And 1966, armored vehicles for the Beatles. I mean, that just kind of blows your mind. Do you imagine how you would feel? You're sick and tired of touring. You think your music sucks. Nothing's working right. Now they aren't even safe. They aren't even safe. And lesser people would give up and just go home. But things got worse. How could it get worse? They played for the Japanese audiences, and the audiences were so quiet, and they sat and listened. No screaming girls, no rushing the stage. They sat and listened, and the Beatles heard themselves, and they did not know they were that bad. How awful is that? So they returned home totally demoralized, totally demoralized. One of them said, you know, playing these concerts has really been just a charade. Oh, how bad does that feel? A charade. All that work, and their concerts are just a charade. So rumors began circulating that they were going to break up, and I remember that, and boy, talk about panic. The world was in panic. The Beatles are going to split up. But what they decided instead was to take 3 months off. And they all went their separate ways for 3 months. And when they got back together, it was Paul McCartney. He was returning to London on a flight, and he had this song going on his mind of a military band, something to do with the band, and eventually that would become Sgt. Pepper. But he got back with the rest of the group, and he wrote this song, and he sang it, and it inspired them. And he said, let's make a whole album about this fictional band. We'll just throw everything into it, and we'll never have to do it live. Can you imagine how good that felt? They wouldn't have to do a live performance because you couldn't. So they brought in a 40-piece orchestra, played all kinds of crescendos, if you remember the songs. They brought in vaudeville, circus, music city, Western, Indian classical music. They threw it all in there. And their creativity just blossomed. And it was all of a sudden, Sgt. Pepper was almost a real band, a real entity. So John Lennon added a song to the mix called Strawberry Fields. It was the name of a children's home, a Salvation Army children's home near where he lived, and he used to play there and listen to the Salvation Army band. And Paul McCartney wrote about Penny Lane, which was a bus stop in London where you would change buses to go different directions. It was called Penny Lane. And John Lennon wrote Lucy in the Sky with Diamonds, and of course all the drug culture people went, I know what that is. That's LSD. But he said, no, my son Julian drew this picture based on Alice in Wonderland stories, and that's where I got the title for this. So all this incredible music came together, and it was Sgt. Pepper's Lonely Hearts Club Band. And by 2011, they had sold 32 million albums. Now, $1 an album, wouldn't you take that? Wow, 32 million. One of the best-selling albums in all history. And it all hinged on one thing, being kind to themselves, taking those 3 months off, letting the creativity come through, meditation, spiritual practices, whatever it was. Just an amazing time. So what does this mean to you? Whatever is happening in your life, you are greater than that. You are greater than that. You hold the key to your life in your own mind. You're intelligent in a world of infinite intelligence. You are spirit in action. You don't need drugs to give something else authority in your life. You need reality. Spiritual practices, meditation, studies. So be kind to yourself when you don't know what to do. When you are at a level where I just don't know what to do, you know what? The answer is always there because infinite intelligence is everywhere. And through these spiritual practices, if you can be open to it, you will hear an answer. There's always an answer. Always. So pay attention to the warning signs when they arise. It can be a problem, it could be somebody's difficult, it can be just about anything. And what Barker says is problems are a sign that something needs to be done in our mind. That's the first place to start. Always the first place to start. So ultimate kindness to yourself is very, very important. And I encourage you, we have prayer practitioners here today. If you'd like clarity on that or a prayer for that to help kickstart kindness to yourself, they're here for you. I encourage you to begin today. So let's do a prayer about that. Today being the first day of the rest of our life. Thank you, God, we're here. Thank you, Spirit, for this wisdom that you've given us through all these teachings, through all these authors, through the music, through the energy in this room. Thank you for knowing that we all have a place to come in our mind, in our heart, in our soul. Whenever we think there's something we don't understand, whenever we think we have a problem, we know there's truly an answer. There is nothing unknown to the mind of God. So I accept that for everyone here this morning. The freedom, this elixir of life that is within, surrounded and supported by all of us. And for that I give great thanks, knowing that this is here for me, for you, at all times. Knowing that the love inside of us that wants to blossom, the creativity that wants to blossom, the joy and the happiness that wants to blossom is like a seed in the center of our heart. And when we water it with love, it's beautiful. It's the most perfect rose. Sweet, beautiful, lovely. So with this, I just relax and let go, knowing God's in charge. It's not me, but I'm right here in my mind, supporting that knowledge. And I let go and know it's already so in the mind of God. And so it is.